Why finding a job in tech feels so hard in 2026. In 2019, a person with 6 months of self-taught JavaScript could land a job paying $85,000. By 2026, a person with 2 years of experience and polished portfolio can send 400 applications and hear nothing back. Same industry, same type of role, but completely different outcome. So either something broke or something was never what it appeared to be. The tech job market didn't collapse overnight, but it did change in ways the most people were not prepared for. And to understand why, we'll need to look at 6 forces that converged at the same time, each one manageable on its own, but together creating an environment that feels almost unrecognizable. For the most of 2010s, the tech industry was expanding at an extraordinary pace. Venture capital was cheap, interest rates were near zero, and investors were willing to fund aggressive growth. Therefore, companies hired fast. Speed mattered more than precision. Managers needed engineers immediately, not in 3 months of careful search, but right now. So hiring standards loosened. Companies took risks on candidates with less experience. Career changers were welcomed. People with 6 months of training were joining real engineering teams. But this wasn't a sign that tech had permanently low barriers to entry. It was a sign that the industry was in a temporary expansion cycle, one fueled by cheap money and optimistic projections. When interest rates rose and funding tightened, that cycle ended. Companies shifted from growth mode to efficiency mode. Therefore, the hiring pace dropped sharply. Not because tech stopped mattering, but because the financial conditions that drove the boom no longer existed. The problem is that millions of people built their career expectations during the boom. They assumed that the boom was the baseline, but it was not. And nobody told them, not the influencers who kept posting success stories, not the platform that kept selling courses. The entire ecosystem had a financial incentive to maintain the illusion that the boom was permanent. Therefore, when reality arrived, it arrived without warning. While hiring was slowing, the number of people trying to enter tech was accelerating. Online platforms launched thousands of courses. Social media created a constant stream of success stories, people posting about career changes, salary jumps, and new offers. Therefore, a massive wave of new candidates entered the market. This is basic economics. When the path looks attractive, more people follow it, but the number of available positions don't grow at the same rate. In fact, the signals that attracted people into the pipeline were lagging indicators. The success stories being shared in 2023 were based on hiring conditions from 2021. By the time someone finished a bootcamp inspired by those stories, the market had already shifted beneath them. A timing mismatched form. People were training for an economy that no longer existed by the time they graduated. By 2026, the supply of aspiring developers vastly exceeds the demand of junior engineers. A single entry-level job posting can now attract from 500 to 2,000 applicants. Even strong candidates struggle now to get noticed, not because they lack ability, but because ratio of candidates to open roles has fundamentally shifted. The pipeline that once felt manageable is now flooded, and when the pipeline is flooded, the filtering becomes ruthless. This creates one of the most painful dynamics in the current market. Companies want developers with experience, but developers need a job to gain experience. The result is a bottleneck at the entry level, one that traps exactly the people who did everything they were told to do. They learned the languages, they built the projects, they contributed to open source, they practiced hundreds of coding challenges. But so did thousands of other candidates. When hiring managers review applications, they naturally gravitate toward people who have already worked on production systems. Someone who has shipped code to real users, someone who has navigated the complexity of working inside a team. So, professional experience becomes a primary filter, even for positions labeled junior. But candidates cannot get that experience without first being hired. This is not a personal failure. This is a structural problem. The market created an enormous number of qualified on-paper candidates, but the number of entry points into the industry did not scale too much, and so thousands of capable people remain stuck in the gap between education and employment. They have the skills, but they lack one thing the companies actually screen for: proof that someone else already took a chance on them. Inside companies, a separate shift was happening. After years of aggressive expansion, Followed by painful layoffs, leadership teams started rethinking their approach to headcount. The question changed from how fast can we grow this team to do we actually need to grow this team at all? New roles opened more slowly and managers were asked to justify every new hire. Budgets were examined more closely and teams were expected to do more with the people they already had. But that wasn't the only change. When the companies did decide to hire, they raised the bar significantly. A role that previously required only 1 year of experience now required 3. The expectation shifted from someone who can learn on the job to someone who can deliver results on day 1. So even when positions do open, they exclude much larger share of the candidate pool than they would have 5 years ago. This is a rational response from companies operating under pressure. But it is devastating for people trying to break in. The door is not closed, but it is much narrower than it used to be, and there are far more people standing in front of it. In 2026, every conversation about tech job market eventually turns to artificial intelligence. AI tools have become a standard part of software development. The effect is measurable. Individual developers are significantly more productive than they were 3 years ago. But here is where it gets uncomfortable. When each engineer can do more, companies need fewer engineers to accomplish the same amount of work. This doesn't mean AI replaced developers. Software systems are still deeply complex. They still require human judgment for architecture, security, reliability, and long-term maintenance. But AI has changed the economics of team size. A task that once required 3 junior developers now can be handled by 1 senior engineer with AI tooling. Boilerplate code that used to take a day to write can now be generated in minutes. Debugging sessions that consumed entire afternoons can be shortened to a single conversation with an AI assistant. The consequence is predictable. Companies feel less urgency to hire at the junior level. They invest in making their existing senior engineers more productive instead of expanding headcount. But there is a deeper issue most people are not discussing. Junior roles were never just about getting cheap labor. They were the training ground. That is where people learn to work in teams, read production code bases, handle deployments, deal with real users, and develop the instincts that separate a student from a professional. Therefore, when companies cut junior roles, they are not just reducing headcount, they are eliminating the development pathway that creates senior engineers. This produces a compounding problem. Fewer junior roles means fewer people gaining experience. Fewer people gaining experience means a shrinking pipeline of future senior engineers. And in 5 to 10 years, when the current generation of senior engineers moves into management or retires, the industry will face an experience gap it created itself. But right now, in 2026, the immediate effect is simple: fewer entry points for new developers. While I've used developers as the primary example here, the same principle applies across other professions and roles, including design and management. There is also a mechanical problem with how modern hiring works. Applying for jobs has become almost frictionless. Platforms like LinkedIn allow someone to submit applications to dozens of companies in a single afternoon. That ease of access sounds like a benefit, but it created a float. Companies now receive hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications for a single role, and they have not scaled their ability to review them. So they rely on automated filtering systems, ATS software that scans CVs for specific keywords, years of experience, and credential patterns. Applications go out, silence comes back. No feedback, no explanation, just silence. But the issue is not that someone reviewed your CV and rejected it. The issue is that no one saw it at all. This is not a conspiracy, it is a scale problem. When 1,500 people apply for one role, there is no realistic way to evaluate each person carefully. The system defaults to pattern matching. And the pattern matching favors people who already look like what the company expects, which almost always someone with existing professional experience. The result is a loop. The people who most need a chance are the least likely to survive the filter. Everything described above creates a practical problem, but it also creates an emotional one. Learning to code requires real sacrifice. People study for months. They build projects after long work days. They solve problems late at night. They push through confusion and frustration because they believe the effort will lead somewhere. So, when the job search stalls, the disappointment hits harder than it would in most other fields. Because the narrative was so specific. Learn these skills, build these projects, get this job. When the promise does not deliver, people internalize the failure. Did I choose wrong technology? Did I start too late? Am I simply not talented enough? But in most cases, the answer is none of the above. There is also a social dimension that makes it worse. People rarely post about failed job searches. Social media is filled with offer letters, not with rejection emails. Someone struggling in silence looks around and assumes that everyone else is succeeding, which deepens the feeling that the problem must be personal. The struggle is not a reflection of individual inadequacy. It is the result of structural forces: a hiring slowdown, a flooded pipeline, rising expectations, AI-driven productivity gains, global competition, broken application systems, all hitting at the same time. Understanding this doesn't make the experience less painful, but it does make it less personal. And that shift from "I am failing" to "I am navigating a difficult market" changes how people make decisions about what to do next. Dear viewers, my name is Nick and I'm still getting used to speaking more freely on camera, especially in English. You may have noticed that this video was recorded in small pieces. I try to make it as varied as possible. But now it is the time for my first ad integration. I have been working remotely as a product manager for 6 years at a company called Alkanost, which specializes in localization of games, mobile apps, software, websites, and more. Remote work allows me to travel, but one of the biggest expenses when you travel is accommodation. One day I discovered a service called Trusted House Sitters. People leave their apartments, houses, and pets in exchange for your help. You look after their animals while they are away. Right now, I'm recording this video from an apartment in Barcelona, living with this guy right here. The annual membership pays for itself after your very first trip, and the pets you care for will give you unforgettable experiences, because taking care of someone is a fundamental human need. If this sounds interesting, check the link in the description and join a community of people and animals who benefit from helping each other. There is one more shift that changed the equation, and it is one that people rarely frame correctly. For individuals, remote work brought real freedom. The ability to travel, to live in different cities, to design your own environment. These benefits are genuine. But when we zoom out from the individual to the job market as a whole, the picture looks very different. Remote work was supposed to expand the opportunity. If you could work from anywhere, geography no longer mattered. A developer in a small town could compete for roles at companies in San Francisco or London. But the opposite also became true. A company in San Francisco could now hire from anywhere in the world. Overnight, local candidates were no longer competing with people in their own city. They were competing with engineers from every time zone, many of whom had strong skills and significantly lower salary expectations. For companies, this was efficient. They could access a global talent pool and optimize for cost. But for candidates, it meant that competition for every single role expanded dramatically. A junior developer in Chicago is no longer competing against other junior developers in Chicago. They are competing against candidates from 50 different countries, many of them with computer science degrees, years of experience, and willingness to work for a fraction of the local market rate. Remote work did not create equal opportunity for everyone. It made competition harder at every level. Despite everything, one thing needs to be stated clearly. Technology is not going away. Software continues to run. Healthcare systems, communication platforms, logistics networks, financial infrastructure. Cybersecurity threats are growing. Data systems are becoming more complex. AI itself requires enormous engineering effort to build and maintain. The demand for technical expertise has not disappeared. The quick path is gone. Getting hired right now takes more time, more patience, and real specialization. Companies want people who can impact their businesses today, not someone who might grow into the role eventually. And the ones who will break through will not always be the ones with the best portfolios. They are the ones who solve real problems for small companies, for local businesses, or open source projects and use that work as proof of impact. Finding a job in 2026 is hard, not because the industry collapsed, but because six forces converged: the end of the hiring boom, a flooded candidate pipeline, the entry-level bottleneck, cautious corporate hiring, AI-driven productivity gains, and global competition through remote work. Each one raised the barrier, together they transformed landscape. The same thing happened to law, to medicine, to finance. Every industry that once had a gold rush phase eventually stabilized. The tech is going through the same transition. The struggle people feel right now is not a personal failure, it is the cost of entering an industry during a structural shift. But the shortage of experienced engineers will only grow. Teams will need people who stay in the field and build real expertise. The window is not closed, it just rewards those who see the market clearly and build for it. And transitions, by definition, do not last forever.